Hello, welcome to Oil for the Journey. I'm Victoria, your journey reader for today, and we are in the book of Esther, one of my favorite books. I think most people would say that because it's just a great story, true, but still that story form. It's not the wars and all that other fun stuff, not so fun stuff, but Esther is a truly beautiful story of an overturning of events, things switching around, things seem to go one way and then flipped. They're flipped. So it's a real good, victorious kind of story. All right, we're starting in chapter 5. Let's hit it. Esther chapter 5. Now it came to pass, or it came about on the third day, that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner courtyard of the king's palace in front of the king's rooms. And the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room, opposite the entrance to the palace. When the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the courtyard, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter, which was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, "What is troubling you, Queen Esther, and what is your request? Up to half the kingdom it shall be given to you." Esther said, "If it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come to this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther desires." So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared. As they drank their wine at the banquet, the king said to Esther, "What is your request? For it shall be granted to you." "And what is your wish?" "Up to half of the kingdom it shall be done." So Esther replied, "My request and my wish is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I wish, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king says." Then Haman went out that day joyful and pleased of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and that he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. Haman controlled himself, however, and went to his house. But he sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of the glory of his riches and his many sons, and every occasion on which the king had honored him. And now he had promoted him above the officials and servants of the king. Haman also said, even Esther the queen, let no one except me come with the king to the banquet which she had prepared. And tomorrow also I am invited by her with the king. Yet all of this does not satisfy me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then Zeresh his wife and all his friends said to him, "Have a wooden gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet." And the advice pleased Haman. So he had the wooden gallows made. Chapter 6. During that night the king could not sleep, so he gave an order to bring the book of records, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written what Mordecai had reported about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who were doorkeepers, that they had sought to attack King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, "What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" And the king's servants who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." So the king said, "Who is in the courtyard?" Now Haman had just entered the outer courtyard of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the wooden gallows which he had prepared for him. So the king's servants said to him, "Behold, Haman is standing in the courtyard." And the king said, "Have him come in." Haman then came in, and the king said to him, "What is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor?" And Haman said to himself, Whom would the king desire to honor more than me?" Therefore Haman said to the king, "For the man whom the king desires to honor, have them bring a royal robe, which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal turban has been placed. Then order them to hand the robe and the horse over to one of the king's noble officials, and have them dress the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, so it shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor." Then the king said to Haman, "Quickly, take the robe and the horse, just as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fail to do anything of all that you have said." So Haman took the robe and the horse and dressed Mordecai and led him on horseback to the city square and proclaimed before him, "So it shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, while Haman hurried home, mourning with his head covered. And Haman informed Zeresh's wife and all his friends of everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you will not prevail over him, but will certainly fall before him." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and quickly brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Chapter 7. Now the king and Haman came to drink wine with Queen Esther. And the king said to Esther on the second day, also as they drank their wine at the banquet, "What is your request, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your wish? Up to half of the kingdom it shall be done." Then Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me as my request, and my people as my wish. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and eliminated. Now, if we had only been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have kept silent, because the distress would not be sufficient reason to burden the king." Then King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, "Who is he, and where is he? Who would presume to do such a thing?" And Esther said, "A foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman." Then Haman became terrified before the king and queen. The king then got up in his anger from drinking wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that harm had been determined against him by the king. Now when the king returned from the palace garden into the place where they had been drinking wine, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, "Will he even assault the queen with me in the house?" As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs who stood before the king, said, "Indeed, behold, the wooden gallows standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good in behalf of the king." And the king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the wooden gallows, which he had prepared for Mordecai. And the king's anger subsided. In Judaism, there is a term in Hebrew, really, regarding the book of Esther in this flipping of events. The word is vanachafohu, and it just simply refers to this miraculous turn of events, flipped on edge. What Haman meant for evil to Mordecai and the Jewish people, he ended up being the one that was hung from the gallows that he created. So interesting, and I find it interesting that it bothered him so much that he was not being honored. And sometimes it's those kind of offenses that draw people to hate another group of people. One person maybe has done something wrong to them, and then it's the whole group of people. So we got to be aware of that in our offenses. Let's not get offended easily. But anyway, so this is a great, great, great story. I love it. And there's been many movies also made about it. So we're on chapter 7. Someone will come up behind me. So you want to stay tuned to Oil for the Journey. Thank you for joining. Have a great day. Shalom, shalom.